Hello and welcome to Point of View Podcasts, a series of conversations from Kaufman Hall and Associates about the challenges and opportunities now facing hospitals and health systems. The economics of healthcare are changing as a new value-based business model, accelerated by the healthcare reform law and the nation's fiscal challenges, is emerging to replace the volume-based model. Hospitals and health systems are responding by acquiring the skills required for success in this changing environment. As Jason Sussman, Managing Director of Kaufman Hall, tells us, strategies to assure long-term financial sustainability are essential. Jason leads the firm's capital and financial planning practice. He joins us to talk about planning in this new era. Jason, what is the key challenge facing hospitals and health systems as a result of the transition from volume to value?
Clearly, the biggest challenge facing hospitals and health systems is uncertainty and the risk associated with that uncertainty. As the law changes, as the regulations under the law change, the issues confronting the hospitals and health systems are evolving. And being able to plan at this point with some level of assuredness as to where the endpoint is a difficult thing.
So what is the first step hospitals and health systems should take in planning for sustainability?
Well, I think the first step is to really go back and look at the plans, both strategic and financial, that the organization has in place, and to really test those plans in an objective and challenging way to say, do the basic assumptions that underlie the plan that we put together, even as recently as a year ago, still make sense as we understand the evolution of the healthcare industry. I think it's really important for organizations to go back to basics. Regardless of the types of fancy planning and analytics you do, it's still the basic financial analytics that underline the plan and the risk assessment that you do that will really position the organization in the best possible way.
What are the essential components of a high-quality plan?
Well, as I said, it's kind of back to basics. So the first thing is to create a truly objective and probably somewhat conservative baseline. So you need to understand, given where things are today, where are we heading? What's the trajectory of the organization over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever your planning horizon is? From that point, once you have everyone grounded in a common foundation, you can start to look at the analytics of various strategies and various changes to what we know today. So if we want to look at readmissions penalties, or we want to look at bundled payments, or we want to look at the addition of an ACO or clinical integration, whatever it happens to be, those are all the things that we're talking about today. But the question is, how do you quantify those, and what do they mean on top of what we have today? So really the key point here is understand your baseline and then begin to incrementally test the other strategies. The other thing is that as you build the structure of your model, because we can't do financial planning today on the back of an envelope like we used to be able to do 20 years ago. So we have to have a relatively complex model. But the model structure has to be developed in a way that can flex and move the material parts. There are some things that don't change, but there are other parts of the model and the organization that we really have to create modeling structure for, so that as we change assumptions, we'll see how that changes the long-term picture for the organization.
Can you talk about some examples?
Simple example is, of course, related to all sorts of payment rates and the structure for payment rates. So we know, for example, that we have a certain structure for Medicare payment today. Well, we can flex inflation rates up and down. That's the most basic example. But what about health insurance exchanges? What happens if and when health insurance exchanges become a basic part of the landscape? We have to make assumptions as to which payers or which patients will flow in through the health insurance exchanges. So it's a payer mix change. And then what payment level will we receive through the health insurance exchange? Will that be Medicaid? Will it be 200% of Medicaid? Will it be some other variation? So we have to structure our modeling to be able to handle those flows of patients around the payment structure.
For hospitals wanting to remain independent, what are the ways they can assess and evaluate the strength of their plan?
This actually hasn't changed at all from 30 years ago. The strength of the plan is really about the long-term sustainability from a financial perspective. From my view, it's about, can an organization over the long haul retain its ability to access capital when it needs to? And so what we look at is, as we build out a baseline, we add the strategies, we look at a number of different metrics, both on the income statement, the balance sheet, cash flow, to say, are we generating additional capital capacity over time? That hasn't changed at all. The question is, what's driving those changes? And that's really what we have to be able to look at. And so when an organization is truly assessing what it takes to remain independent, the variables today are different than the variables were 5 years ago. So now we want to look at, are we creating scale? Are we creating market essentiality if we don't have it? Do we have the ability to fund the types of strategies such as clinical integration or population health management? Do we have the financial wherewithal to fund those strategies? Do we have the intellectual resources, and can we acquire those resources over the course of this plan to make sure that our organization is essential 5 years from now?
We know that there's lots of consolidation going on in the industry right now. Even for those hospitals that want to remain independent, should they develop and assess plans for possible strategic partnerships? And what does this involve?
Well, that's a natural flow from the last question, actually. If you're truly looking at the sustainability of your organization as an independent, that means that all options should be on the table. And so as you go through the process, you come to a fork in the road and you say, we either can sustain ourselves in the long run and be successful, or we can't. And so if you're doing your financial planning objectively and appropriately, you're actually asking that question throughout the process. When you get down to it, I'll give an example. We had an organization that we did the financial planning for. The end point of the plan showed some weakness at year 4 and year 5. The weakness was not related to payment levels or productivity, but rather their ability to retain market share and volume. So the question for them was, how do we protect our market? And for them, the end result was, we need to find a partner who can bring brand to our table, not capital. So an asset merger wasn't something they needed. What they needed was an affiliation that would sort of allow them to rise in terms of the perspective of the market and quality and so forth. But that was driven by the financial plan saying, guys, you can't allow your market share and therefore your volume to dwindle and to have commercial payers moving out of the market to other providers. You need to protect that by being the provider of choice.
Throughout the planning process, how can hospitals enhance the likelihood of success?
Now more than ever, the financial planning process needs to be taken outside of the finance department. So this needs to be a process that, one, is completely integrated with the strategic planning process. And in order to make that happen, it has to involve the full breadth of the management team. So it's not okay for the CFO to run some numbers and say, here's our financial plan. What is okay is for that dialogue to occur with the CEO, with the chief nursing officer, chief medical officer, COOs, the whole C-suite, because all of those perspectives are vital to developing what is truly an objective set of assumptions and scenarios that can then be played out. The key is, because we're in this time of uncertainty and risk, is to identify as many of those risk scenarios as we possibly can. And then to develop, I'll call them contingency plans, around all of those potential risk scenarios. And you might even say, weight the probabilities of those plans to then accomplish several things. One, you've informed the entire management team of the breadth and the magnitude of the issues. You've informed and educated that same group as to how those issues are intertwined. So strategy X has Y implications, but if strategy X is not successful, it has Z implications. That's really important for management teams to understand. And to integrate all of the pieces. I mentioned strategic planning, there's IT planning, there's facility planning, there's ongoing operations. We have to be able to take all those plans and convert them into specific, measurable, monitorable, if that's such a word, action plans with responsibilities assigned to everyone around the table that can be controlled, managed, and reviewed on an ongoing basis and adjusted as we learn more about where this market is going. So the key here to success is objective analytics, broad thinking, everything on the table, and then measurement and monitoring on the back end across the entire management team.
That was Jason Sussman, Managing Director at Kaufman Hall. And to hear more in this series, Point of View podcasts, visit us online at www.kaufmanhall.com.